My name is Rafael, you're watching Rock and Roll Garage, and today we're going to talk about 6 bands that the Prince of Darkness, Mr. Ozzy Osbourne, loves. But first, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave your comment below, tell me if you knew about these bands or not, and let's start. Well, the first one is simply Ozzy's favorite band of all time, the band that inspired him to become a musician, and not only him, but millions of people all over the world, which is the Beatles. Ozzy was a huge Beatles fan, and there's a funny thing that when he was young and he thought that he didn't know he could become a musician, and he dreamed about one of his sisters, marrying Paul McCartney. That would be a way for him to have contact with the Beatle. If one of his sisters married anybody from the band, but he was thinking specifically of Paul McCartney. He said this many times over the decades, and although he liked Paul McCartney obviously, but his favorite Beatle, by reading what he said about the band over the decades, really he had a special feeling for John Lennon. And he loved not only the Beatles, but especially John Lennon's solo career. And you can see that on Ozzy's 2005 album, which is a covers album called Undercover. He covered the Beatles' In My Life, the song, and he covered 2 John Lennon solo songs, which were Woman and Working Class Hero. And then in 2010, he covered as a single the John Lennon solo track, How. So he really loved John Lennon, and he was really one of his favorite songwriters of all time. So the Beatles are his favorite band. And we move to the second one, which is Led Zeppelin. And Led Zeppelin, the interesting thing is that Zeppelin was formed in the same year as Black Sabbath in 1968. And the members of the band knew each other already before they were famous. And there are really interesting interviews where Ozzy recalls that Ozzy and Geezer Butler, the bassist and main lyricist of Black Sabbath, they just met by accident. The Robert Plant and John Bonham and all those guys from Led Zeppelin in the subway, for example, and there's an interesting conversation where Ozzy and Geezer asked Robert Plant what they were up to, what they were doing. They said, "Oh, we've just formed a new band called the New Yardbirds, which will later be renamed as Led Zeppelin." So they kind of followed each other until they became famous, and obviously Led Zeppelin had the chance to release their first album quite before Black Sabbath. Already in 1968, Black Sabbath would release their groundbreaking debut album just in 1970. And they really were an inspiration for Black Sabbath, because in an interview for a documentary back in 1995, Ozzy, the documentary was called History of Rock and Roll, and we transcribed that. And everything I'm saying here, you can go to the description and read the entire article. You're going to find the links for all these interviews and see everything I'm saying here, okay? You can see the complete thing in the description if you read the article. And in this interview for the documentary, Ozzy said, Led Zeppelin 1, the album, I remember listening to the first Zeppelin album. It was such a great breath of fresh air for somebody doing something acceptable, but yet so different. And not only Ozzy said that about Led Zeppelin, because Tony Iommi, who is Sabbath's co-founder and the guitarist, the riff master, he already said that when Zeppelin released their first album, all those bands, Black Sabbath, Deep Purple already said this as well, that they saw it was possible to be successful doing that kind of music, heavier kind of rock and roll. So Led Zeppelin was not only an inspiration for Black Sabbath, but for all those heavier bands that emerged later, or they changed their sound, like Deep Purple, for example. And Ozzy also revealed in an interview with Rolling Stone back in 2017 that Led Zeppelin 4 is one of his favorite albums of all time. And he told Rolling Stone, "I've always been a huge Led Zeppelin fan. All of their studio albums are classics, but this one is one of my all-time favorites." And he also listed for Rolling Stone in 2004 his favorite singers of all time, and he put it on that list Robert Plant. He believes that Robert Plant is one of the greatest vocalists of all time. And we move to the next one, which is AC/DC. And the interesting thing is that AC/DC was Black Sabbath's opening act in the late 70s, but that didn't ended up that good, because they were kicked out of that tour by Black Sabbath, because one night Malcolm Young, AC/DC's co-founder and rhythm guitarist, got in a fight with Geezer Butler, and you can also read more about that in the article we wrote. And they were kicked out of the tour. You know, it was at the bar. There are people who say that Malcolm pulled a knife to Geezer Butler, so it's a crazy story. But obviously, later on, they became friends. You know, everybody were more experienced and they were older, and they used to go see each other and etc. So no hard feelings about that. And Ozzy revealed also in an interview in 2017 with Rolling Stone that Highway to Hell, the final album with Bon Scott on vocals, was his one of his favorite albums made by AC/DC. And the interesting thing that he also said that although he likes Brian Johnson, his favorite AC/DC vocalist is Bon Scott, although he likes the Brian Johnson era as well. And he described AC/DC as a meat and potatoes, which is something simple, but that is good and works. So that's how he described AC/DC, because they never changed their style, they never changed their sound, the way they write songs. That's why many people say, oh, every AC/DC album is the same, there's no differences, and etc. But that's how Ozzy described AC/DC because of that. And there's an interesting thing that we also transcribed. DVD released by AC/DC in 2011, which is from that incredible concert they recorded in Argentina at the River Plate Stadium, the football team River Plate on their stadium. It's just an incredible show. If you haven't seen it, you should check it out. Amazing audience. Although I'm Brazilian, and I think the Brazilian audience is much better than the Argentinian audience. Just kidding. But he said this: "I've met AC/DC for the first time touring in Sydney with Black Sabbath. I remember thinking these guys can't be around touring using so much energy at every concert. They're not going to be able to do that in a few years. Angus is like a machine that never stops. He keeps going and going. He's still got the fucking energy, man. They are a really great bunch of guys. They are my friends, are real people. I love them all. God bless them. There is no other band in the world like them. They are a meat and potatoes band. There's no bollocks. There's no fucking around. Whether you like them or you don't. I'm proud to say I love them." That's what Ozzy said about AC/DC. And we move to the next one. I'm sorry for the long video, but there's so many interesting things to say about these bands. And the next one is Motörhead. And obviously, that's one you should expect, because Ozzy and Lemmy were great friends. And as you might know if you're an Ozzy fan, Ozzy was never a great lyricist. He was more into melodies. And during his solo in Black Sabbath, it was Geezer Butler who wrote most of the lyrics when the original formation was together. And on Ozzy's solo career, Bob Daisley, the bassist, wrote a lot of the lyrics, and many other people in the band. But in the 90s, that incredible Ozzy album No More Tears, released in 1991. Lemmy Kilmister is credited in helping to write I Don't Want to Change the World, Mama I'm Coming Home, huge hit, and the track Desire, and also Hellraiser, which Motörhead re-recorded afterwards. And 1 year later, in 1992, Ozzy appeared on the Motörhead album March or Die, and did a duet with Lemmy in the ballad I Ain't No Nice Guy. Such a great song. If you haven't heard, you should check it out. Which also had Slash playing the guitar solo. It's just an incredible track. If you haven't heard, incredible ballad with Ozzy and Lemmy Kilmister. I mean, and Slash. What else can you ask for? And so they were great friends. Have had a huge, beautiful history together, and you know, Motörhead, another band. And we move to the next one, which is Nirvana, which curiously is a grunge band, and the band that is credited for killing rock, heavy metal music. They kind of, when they released Nevermind, and obviously you had Soundgarden, you had Pure Jam, and many other great brands, Alice in Chains. And, you know, the focus of things shift. They put music back to the basics and etc. All the excess of the glam metal, the hair bands and etc. that was carried away, and the whole music business, the radios, MTV, changed the focus for those new bands that were playing a more kind of basic thing, and their image was more basic as well. No hairsprays or makeup and etc. And Ozzy liked Nirvana, and he said in an interview with Launch Radio Networks in 2007 that the band led by Kurt Cobain was one of his favorite hard rock groups of all time. And he even compared in a conversation with VH1 the band with the Beatles. He said, I love Nirvana. It was like heavy metal meets the Beatles, you know, to a point. That's what he said. And if you didn't know that, we already made a video that you can see here or in the description about 4 bands, if I'm not mistaken, that Nirvana refused to be the opening act. And Ozzy wanted Nirvana as his opening act during his solo career in the 90s, but they refused to because they didn't want to play in arenas or open the show for other people. So they refused Ozzy's offer to be his opening act. And that's one of those interesting things. But Ozzy loves Nirvana, and he really liked their music. And we reach the final band, which is also a heavy metal band, Judas Priest. And Judas is a band that became really big during that second wave of the British heavy metal that we used to describe those bands that appeared there after the mid-70s and really got famous there in the late 70s and the early 80s. So you had Iron Maiden, even Def Leppard is considered a band from the new wave of the British heavy metal, and obviously Judas Priest. They released British Steel, their probably most famous album, in 1980. So they were kind of part of that group. And Ozzy and Judas and Black Sabbath. Judas also came from Birmingham, the same place Black Sabbath was formed, and you know they had, it's crazy, you know, they're great friends, Ozzy and Rob Halford, the vocalist of Judas, and probably if I'm not mistaken, Rob was one of the few people who replaced great singers in Black Sabbath for one night or two, because in 1992, when Ronnie James Dio reunited with Black Sabbath during the Humanizer album, they recorded the Humanizer, released in 1992, and they were on tour. You had Vinny Appice on drums back, and Ronnie James Dio, and obviously Tony Iommi and Geezer Butler. But Geezer and Tony accepted an offer to be Ozzy's opening act, and I mean, that's really crazy. I mean, you fired the vocalist of your band, and obviously he became really famous, and then you accept to be his opening act. I mean, Black Sabbath, in my opinion, is much bigger than Ozzy. And you know, I don't know why they did that, if it was for money or anything, but Ronnie was really pissed with that, and he didn't want that. That's what really caused that friction between them. He refused to sing, and he left the band. And to play that concert, they called Rob Halford to fill for Ronnie, and it was Rob who played with Sabbath that night. He was Sabbath's vocalist, and for almost the entire show, Ozzy sang with them a few songs, and it's just crazy. I mean, and Ozzy and Rob accepted that. There's the entire show on YouTube if you want to watch. You can look for in the search. And later on in 2005 or 4, if I'm not mistaken, at the Ozfest in 2004, at the Ozfest, Ozzy, there will be a Black Sabbath reunion, and it was the original lineup with Bill Ward on drums. But Ozzy was feeling sick the day of the show, and he couldn't make it, and they didn't want to cancel it. So what Sharon Osbourne did, she called Rob Halford, and she put him in a plane, and he went to the place, and he sang with the band. And it's just crazy, you know. You can look for on YouTube, you got videos of those two performances, and they both love each other's work. And it's just one of those other interesting things in rock and roll and heavy metal. And that's it. I hope you liked the video. I've talked too much today, and it's just so many great things, so many incredible informations and little interesting things about these bands. And as I said, if you want to read more about this, read all the interviews, watch all the interviews, you go to the description and read the entire complete article we wrote about this. And please subscribe to the channel if you like the video, leave a comment below, and obviously visit Rock and Roll Garage and subscribe to the channel. Okay? Thank you for watching, and I see you later.